Hi guys, it's English teacher Louise. This video is about some common Australian English expressions that you might use working in customer service here in Australia. So first I'm going to talk about greeting people. One common expression that you'll hear in Australia is how are you going instead of how are you. You may hear how are you too, but you might hear people saying how are you going. So it just means how are you. You can say well, thanks, fine, thank you, and continue on with the conversation. So how are you going? How are you going today? Fine, thanks. Okay. Next is, what about when you're in a line or you want to ask for help, or if you're the person, for example, working at a cafe or a store and there are people waiting in line, what is the language that you use in that situation? So for example, say you're serving someone but you're a bit busy doing something else, but there's a customer waiting. It's really good to acknowledge the customer, but what do you say? Generally in Australia, in Australian English, you might hear expressions like, I'll be right with you, I'll be right with you, which means I'll be with you very soon. So you could say, hello, I'll be right with you. Other expressions that you might use or hear are, I'll be with you in a minute. Or because Australians like to shorten words, you might hear, I'll be with you in a mini. Mini meaning minute. You might also hear, I'll be with you in a sec, or I'll be with you in a second. Obviously sec is the shortened form of second. You might also hear, I'll be with you in a tick, which is another expression that people use. Tick, like the clocks on the hands on a clock tick, they go tick, tick, tick. That's where I'll be with you in a tick comes from. So that's what you could say. If people are waiting and you're busy, you could say, I'll be with you in a sec, or I'll be right with you, or any of the other expressions that I mentioned. Another really common thing that people say is, are you right? Or are you all right? They do this when, say you're serving people and you want to check that that person has ordered or hasn't ordered. You might say, are you right there? Or are you right? You don't very often hear, can I help you here? You hear, are you right? And you will also hear that from other people. Say you're waiting in a line for a coffee. Generally, Australians are very polite and want to make sure that the first person in the line gets served. So generally they won't want to cut in front of you, and to avoid that happening, they'll generally check that you've ordered or that they're not pushing in. So they say, are you right? And you can say, yeah, I'm fine, I've ordered, thank you. Or please go ahead, or go for it. So it's just that, and you can say that to people as well. Say if you're not sure if they've ordered yet and you don't want to cut in front, you could say, are you right? Or have you ordered? So these are all the general everyday expressions that you hear people saying, not the expressions that you might learn in a textbook. These are real life expressions. Another one is go for it. Australians like to say go for it if they want to encourage you to do something, or say you say, are you right? They might say, no, go for it, meaning go ahead and order, and you should just acknowledge them and say thank you and go ahead and order. Also, if you're serving in a line and you want to know who was next, which is another thing that's really important in Australian culture, who was first in the line, and that it's fair and that the first person in the line gets served. So you as the waiter or the waitress or the customer service person at the shop might say, who was next, please? Who was next, please? Just if you're not sure who was next, that's the easiest way, and the person who is generally honestly next will come forward. The other thing I want to say is, don't feel bad when you don't understand something. Remember that you're learning, you're in a new country, and people use colloquial language just like they do in any country. So there are things that you may have studied English for many, many years and be very advanced, but people in an everyday situation will use colloquial expressions that they use every day in Australia. And it doesn't mean that your English is not good for not understanding. It's just a colloquial expression that you haven't learnt yet. So don't worry about it. Just be prepared. Just be polite and and ask people what they meant if you didn't catch it. So, for example, if you're a waiter or a waitress, I've heard stories from a lot of my friends who don't speak English as a first language, and when they come here, they learn very quickly how Australian people actually order food or drink. For example, as a waitress, you will most likely hear cab sav for red wine Cabernet Sauvignon. People always say a cab sav. And Australians also shorten words, so they'll say bikkie for biscuit or chockie for chocolate. These are really common things. So you'll pick up on these things as soon as you start, the more that you start to speak with native speakers. But it's just the same as anything. Like, I learnt Spanish, but I'm not going to learn in a textbook what I learn in Colombia on the streets and in shops when people actually talk to me. You know, I learned for years, I can learn how to say, buenos dias, ¿cómo está? But then I can be in Colombia and people will just say, ¿qué hubo, qué más? I learned that from being there. It doesn't mean that my Spanish is not good. It just means, hey, this is how people might use language here. So, yeah. The other thing I wanted to say, my biggest tip for working in customer service is please don't say what to people when you don't understand. In English, saying what sounds really, really rude. Okay, I know it's a direct translation of care, but whenever I go past and I see a waiter or a waitress saying what to an Australian customer, I think, because I know that customer will think that that's quite rude, and there might be not a nice exchange after that. So please, the direct what is quite rude. Please say something like sorry, or pardon, or sorry, I didn't catch that, or what was that? The easiest to remember is probably pardon or sorry. Yeah, that would be much more polite. Okay, I hope that this little introduction to some everyday Australian in the workplace has helped you. Thank you. Bye.